All right, what's up everyone? This is Don, Third Creative, and this is the walkthrough tutorial video for the Field Multi-Sport Photoshop template. In this video, I'm going to walk you through all of the layers and the processes and hopefully cover anything and everything that you might need to know in order to create the best images possible. Before we jump in, touch on a few things with this design that I like. I couldn't decide on one font. There's just so many, and as all of us know, we can use any font that we want, but I decided to include 4 primary fonts, which I'll go ahead and zoom in just a little bit. You can see the default font here is a nice brush stroke, but we've got a few others that I thought looked good, so you have some choices. They're built in. You will have to install them, but they're built-in options, as you will see. Also, there's some versatility here, and for anyone who is able and would like to create some ground shadows, you can get some really nice looks out of this design. If you turn off or move some layers, such as the text layers, the soccer goal, orange pylons, you can get different looks, which you can see the orange pylons here in the background. It also allows it to be used for other sports besides soccer. So got some sample images of lacrosse and flag football, but I would imagine field hockey, just anything that's played on grass, you could probably pull it off. Baseball as well. Let's jump into this thing and get started. I always like to start with 4x5 vertical, and I always like to start at the very bottom of the layer panel. Again, it's always a good idea to just kind of go through and turn on and off some layers, just see what everything is, where it's at, get a feel for the layout. But we're going to start at the very bottom here with the background layer folder. If we open that up, there's a little bit going on in here. The background is one solid image with the exception of the pylons and the soccer goal. I have it split up into 2 because I wanted to add some Gaussian blur just to create some depth of field. I didn't want the background to be completely in focus. So if we turn this one off, you can kind of see it's subtle, but it makes everything a little bit sharper. So these bottom 2 layers are just the background. You turn them off, you see what you lose there. We also have a background fog / atmosphere. This is kind of subtle, but if you turn it off, you can see it, the difference that it makes. So adds a little bit of realism with the sunshine. I didn't want everything back here so bold and crisp. Next we have a layer folder that houses the pylons, and they can be turned off. So if you would rather not have these orange pylons back here, you can turn the entire folder off. You can turn off the left side or the right side. You can also open it up and work with each individual one. You can move them around, you can scale them. More than likely you won't need to do anything that specific or detailed with them, but they are their own layers, so if you need to do anything with them, you can. Next we have a layer that is turned off by default, but it's just a little bit of extra background fog. So if you turn it on, you can see it just kind of adds a little bit more if that's a look that you're going for. We also have another layer that is turned off by default called Desaturate Background Colors. Talk about this just for a little bit. I have everything, the saturation down here. You can see I've got hue saturation on both of these. It's kind of boosted where it's very vivid, very bright, very colorful. You may want to tone it down a little bit, and this is a layer that you can turn on to do that. It's kind of subtle, but I set it to an amount that I thought would be a good starting point, but you can open this up and all it is the saturation. The global master saturation is reduced to -30, so you can increase it a little bit, you can bring it down even more if you want. if you want a little bit more of a moody look. Something else that you can do, which I did on one of my sample images, is change the color of the sky. I had another soccer image for Coulter's younger brother where the blue was a little bit different. The sky is mostly cyan, so if you select cyans, you can actually move this slider to get, you don't want to get too crazy, obviously, but if you move it a little bit to the left, you can see what starts to happen. Move it a little bit to the right. This also allows you to control the saturation or lightness and darkness of the sky. There is a little bit of blue in there, but I found that you can adjust it with the cyans pretty well. So that is also an option if you want to get that detailed. But by default, it is set to -30, which will give you a look kind of like this. That's it for the background. We have our upper text layer, so let's open that up. So we've got last name options here. We've got last name option 1, which if we go to our character panel, we can see it is, I believe, pronounced Selenka. Turn that off. We can look at our next option, which is passionate relationship. That's a great name for a font. I have a arch applied to this, so if you want or need to adjust that, if you double click here to highlight your entire text, come up to this icon. It is set to -15, so you can go with more, you can go with less, or you can come up here and just apply none, or you can play around with these and get different looks, but that is how you would adjust it. We'll cancel that. We also have Freshman, nice classic font here, and it also has the same arch applied. And then the fourth option is called Peace Sans, which is another look that I thought worked well with this design, so I included it. I had several more, but I felt like I was already getting a little carried away with these 4. So each of these has some layer styles applied. To change the color, it's just a general color, and you can change it here, or if you select all of your text up here, pick any color that you like or that you need. Have some things that are turned off that you can turn on, and if we zoom in, you can kind of see what it will do. I've got a bevel, so if you want to add a little bit of depth to your stroke, you can turn that on. I've got an inner shadow, which also creates just a little bit of depth. With a darker color, you don't see it as much, but if we went with a lighter color, you can see. You can also increase, if I double click on the inner shadow, you can also increase the opacity if you want it darker. You can adjust the distance. You can do some things there if you want to. Also, I have the option for a gradient color, so this just adds even a little bit more to it. It takes a little bit more time to change a gradient, but it's very easy. Just double click on gradient overlay. Once you've turned it on, you'll see this box here. If you click on it, it'll open your gradient editor. If you have one that is in your history here that you want to use, that's great, but otherwise, if you just come down here, click on this first box on the lower side here, click on the color box, and you can choose your starting color, and this will apply to the bottom. Once you get that, come over here to the right hand side, and this little box, once you see this, you can open it up and you can pick your next color. Simple as that. You can keep playing around with it. I always recommend that if you find one that you like and you're going to be customizing other fonts in this same file or other files, go ahead and hit new, and then if you come down to the bottom, you'll see it'll save it, and that's why I have so many of these already. I've saved so many. But that is how you would change the color if you opt to use a gradient overlay. Same thing applies for all 4 of these last name font options, which you can play around with or keep it just like it is. Next we have our first name. So this one there's actually 5. So I have a sub font, which is Versa, and if you come down here you can see the word club and 2024, the year. That is the sub font that is Versa, and by default the first name will be that same font, but if you want to change it you can, and it's the same options, which I can go through and turn them all on so that you can see. This doesn't have any layer styles, it's just a solid color, and you would come up here and pick in your character panel, or we have this new bar here, or by double clicking on the T to highlight your text, and then you'll see it up here. But you can change it to anything that you want. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Let's see, next we have our soccer goal, which is a smart object. It's got some shadows built in. We can open it up and take a look at it. That's what we're working with. Close that up. Now you can scale this down. I'll click on one of these anchor points in the corner. I hold down shift the way mine is set up to maintain proportions, and you can make it smaller, you can make it bigger. Now you just have to be careful because it's not going to look right if you get too carried away as far as the perspective. But you do have the option to move it around, scale it up or down if you need to. Next we have a sun flare, and that is up here. It's pretty subtle. I think I've got it set at 51%. You can turn it off. You can see it just kind of lays over the whoops, wrong one. Lays over the name text here. Just adds a little bit of dimension to it, so you can adjust the opacity if you want, or turn it off completely if you don't want it. Next we have our subject image. I'm going to turn off this layer up here so you can kind of see. This is where you would insert your subject images, scale and position them. I have ground shadows that I painted in myself, and you have the option to do that as well if you would like. It's kind of a cool look. But if I turn that off, you can see there's a very subtle just ground shadow that I've got in there that you can use. And if you do use it, then you would just want to paint in some of your contact shadows, which hopefully I'll have a video on that one of these days. And I think that's it for the subject images. Let's turn this back on. Next we have some color grading options. These are in a lot of my templates, so if you've watched previous videos, it's all the same thing. This is a LUT, or a color lookup. If I double click to get the properties, you'll see it's crisp warm. You'll see that the opacity is at 20%, so if you turn it off, you can see it just kind of lose some of its warmth and some of its contrast. So you don't want to get too carried away with it. If you increase it too much, it'll start to look a little weird. But if it already feels like it's too much, you can decrease the opacity to an amount that you like, or you can just turn it off completely. Another color grading option that I have applied by default is just a solid color set to soft light with the opacity reduced to, what is this, 15%. So if you turn that off, you can see it loses some of its warmth. I do not have this clipped to the subject image, so it applies universally to the background as well as your subject, and it kind of helps tie it all together. So it's not quite as good as if you were to use the Neuro filter, you know, in order to tie your subject in with the background, but it's a little bit easier, especially if you're using any type of automation. You can change the color, so if you double click here and you want, say, something a little more orange, you can do that. It's very subtle. Or if you want to go cooler, you can do that. Come up here into the blues, and of course you can increase or decrease the saturation as well, and of course you can always just turn it off if you don't like the way that it looks. Next we have our lower foreground text layers. So that's what we have all down here, and clipped to it is a wrinkle texture. So before we get into this folder with all of the text layers, we'll talk about the wrinkle texture. I've got a level set so that, and it's set to a blend mode of multiply. So if you turn it off, you can see it loses its texture there. So you can turn that off if you wish to. You can also click on an anchor point and move it around. So if you change things up and you want to see what it looks like moving around to get the wrinkles placed differently or strategically, you can do that. You can scale it down, you can scale it up. You have some options there. Let's look into this last folder, the lower foreground text layers. We'll open that up. So we've got a subtext left, which can be anything you want. I have it set to year, and it is the default subtext of Versa. So if you change that to something that is bigger than this little background shape that I have, you can come down here, and with your move tool selected, click on any of these anchor points. And once it looks like this, just grab this anchor point, click and drag out. You can do the same on the left, and you can move it. You can also make it taller. So however you set your text up, you can manipulate this to fit and position it how you want. Changing the subtext is the standard way. So up here in your character panel, in this bar, or double clicking your text, it'll be up here at the top. Change it to anything you want. There is a drop shadow that is turned off by default. You can turn it on, and you can adjust it if you want to. I'm calling it the small rectangle banner. The shape that is behind the text just has a color overlay, so pretty simple. You can double click the word color overlay, come to this box and change it to the color that you want. Same thing applies down here where I have the word club. It can say anything that you want, or you can turn it off and get rid of it, but you can have anything that you want. So if you just have your team name, like for example I have soccer here, but if you have your team name and then you put soccer here where club is, you know, that's a look that you could get. You have options with that. Next we have our team name text, and I put that in a folder to kind of keep them all to themselves, and again it's the same 4 font options, so you can turn them off and turn them on and see how they work, how they look. I have a stroke outline, and it's pretty thick, and it kind of gives like that sticker decal look. You can open it up and make sure you have stroke selected, and you can play with the size if you want it bigger, if you want it smaller. You can play around with that. It does have a drop shadow that's turned on just to create a little dimension and depth. Let's see, actually let me not forget, I have drop shadow applied to the actual folder, and that is so that it shows up better with this very large stroke. It shows up better to have it on the folder than to use it on the actual text layer. So if you want to get rid of the drop shadow altogether, you'll have to come up here and turn that off, or you can adjust it. Let's see, we have, oh, I know, I have 2 different colors. This is something that I don't believe you can do with automation. There may be some wizards out there that may have figured it out, or maybe will. But if you're changing it manually, this is your team name, so you're not changing it on every player. Double click on the T here to highlight all of your text. Now you have your text tool selected, so with your cursor just click in the middle where the words, the colors transition from one to the other, and drag to highlight the portion that you want to change the color of. And so I can go with just anything here and click OK. Now you would repeat that process for the rest of it. So click and drag to highlight the next portion that you want to change, and pick the color that you want. We'll hit cancel, and we'll cancel out of it so that it doesn't change. But that's how you can get the two different colors on the same text line. And then we have this large rectangle banner, which basically this just provides a little more coverage for the feet. So if you turn it off, this actually covers the feet, and I think that still looks pretty good. So you do have the option to turn it off. There is a larger one down here that you can turn on, and of course you can move it up and down or change it if you want to. But by default it's going to look like this. Same thing, you can click on these anchor points, drag them out, you can make it bigger, you can change the shape of it if you want to, and then of course change the color using the color overlay right here. So some options. I will say if you choose to show the feet in the ground shadows, what you can do is select the wrinkle texture and this folder together by holding down Shift and clicking on one then the other, and now you can move it down, you can scale it down so you still have it, and then you can also position your subject a little bit differently. So if I were to do that, if I wanted to show ground shadows and keep the text like it is, you can move things around like that. Lots of different looks that you can get. I think that's it. This one is probably the easiest and quickest to customize out of all of the designs that I have. I do want to touch on a few things with the horizontal file, and then a few things on the Memory Mate, and we'll wrap it up. So let's jump over to the 5x4 horizontal team file. Okay, so now we have our 5x4 horizontal file pulled up, a file that you would traditionally use for your team images. The one thing that I wanted to cover here is that we have a text folder here towards the bottom that says upper background text layers. If I turn that off, you can see the upper text goes away. So I just felt like there was a lot of dead space up here. I mean, I know we have the sky and the clouds and the sun, but some of you may want to fill that space with something. So I went ahead and added the text layers here, which are going to be the same for primary fonts, so you can see what they look like if I turn them off and turn them on. So you can see that these they have the arch applied, which can be modified as I demonstrated earlier. Let's turn this one back on. So I have the fill set to 30%. It's a blue color, so it kind of matches the sky, but it just gives you a darker color so that you can see it. Now you can reduce the fill even more if you want it to be more subtle. You can bring it down to 0 and only the inner shadow will show. But by default, have it set at 30%. And kind of the same thing here. We've got the bevel emboss, the stroke, the gradient that you can turn on and apply if you want more. It just depends on where you feel like it starts to get a little too distracting, but by default this is what it looks like, and it's all of the same font options. So I wanted to touch on that. Now as far as the Memory Mate, it has its own dedicated file, which I'll show you here. There's a few things that I want to talk about as far as how that works. But you always want to start with your 5x4 horizontal and create your team image. You want to save it as a JPEG. That way when you are working with your Memory Mate, you can just drag and drop your team image into this template. So you see these red folders here. The bottom one, it says insert 5x4 team image here. So I'll open that up and we have our sample image. I do have another one here, so I'll just bring this over here and we'll just pick this one. So all you need to do is drag and drop, let go. You can hit the check mark. You want to turn off or delete the sample team image. I know this one isn't much different, but We'll just pretend it's the one that you already created. And now I'm going to click on an anchor point, hold down Shift, and scale it down. You can size it however big or small you want, position it how you want. Once you get it how you like it, hit the check mark, and you're good. A few other things. This one I have the color grading options on here twice, and the reason is because on the team image, if you use the color grading option, it already has it, and then when you come to your memory mate, it would apply it again, which would basically double the intensity or the effect, and it doesn't necessarily look good. So what I decided to do was put the color grading options down here where they would apply to everything in the background, but then also have the same color grading options up here clipped to your subject image folder. So all you need to do is copy and paste the same color values. So if you started out here, you can have this open, you would copy this code, and then you would do the same thing here. Open it up, paste the code, hit OK. Same thing here. And then with this, it's already in here, so you would just make sure that you have the same opacity level on all of them, just to match. Sounds a little complicated, but it's really not. It's pretty easy. And what else? I will say you may have a subject facing the opposite direction. So just let's say he was facing the opposite direction. So we'll just flip him real quick. Flip him horizontally. So let's say you have this and you don't like how that looks, him facing this way, and you want to put him over on this side. You can do that. So obviously you would just position your team image over here, and you would need to come down to the soccer goal and move it over here. Now you can leave it like that, but if you want to take it a step further, you can also flip the soccer goal horizontally. With it selected, come up to Edit and come down to Transform, and then we come down here to Flip Horizontal. And so you basically have the same thing, just flip the other way. So that is how you can set it up for a left orientation versus the right orientation that it has by default. What else? I don't think there is anything else. So hopefully I've covered everything. And if I have not, as always, you're welcome to reach out. You can shoot me an email at don@thirdcreative.com. That's all I have for now, and it's time to move on to the next one. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you.